Hello and welcome everyone to Gendering Geopolitics, my Twitter series that consists of short and sharp 10-minute conversations with women who are rocking the boat. My name is Emily Prey, and I'm a senior analyst at the New Lines Institute in Washington, D.C. And today I have the honor of speaking with Baroness Helena Kennedy, one of the top human rights lawyers in the world. I know you're a very busy woman, so thank you so much for being with me today.
It's a great pleasure.
So we're going to be discussing women in the law today, so let's just dive right into it. What are some of the policy implications of the institutionalized and systematic sexism, racism, and classism in the law?
Well, one of the great challenges is that, and we know this, that law had its roots in the rules that were created, often rooted in religion, but rules created in society where men were in power. And therefore, even black letter law is often discriminatory against women. And on top of that, of course, you have the interpretation of law, which comes out of a patriarchal set of values where people have also been socialized within law to interpret things in a particular way, and often to the disadvantage of women. And this is true the world over. You know, it's one of the things that amazed me as I became a more mature lawyer was that as I traveled and became more involved in international law, was that there's a sort of sameness about how this operates in every jurisdiction and whatever the system of law. And so it's always seemed to me that it's one of the great important leaps forward was the creation of international human rights law, because it established women's rights as human rights, and it gave us often levers to talk about the way in which women's rights were not being respected and how that impacted on the victims, for example, of gender-based violence. The experiences that women have had in their lived experience was testament to this. And so going to the courts which were run by men, where the law in all its manifestations was male created, was something that I encountered from when I was a very young lawyer in the late 70s. And I was doing cases then which were about violence towards women, and it was diminished in its seriousness. It was seen as a social problem amongst the poor and the dysfunctional, and it was never seen as the thing that actually operated irrespective of race, irrespective of social class or caste or anything, that it permeated all of society. And now there has come to be a much greater recognition that comes out of disparities in power, and that control can be exercised in many different ways, and not just through violence, but actually through coercive control, through financial control, through the many ways in which a woman's life can be limited and a woman can be kept in her social place, which of course is now being challenged around the world by women.
And so I know that you've spoken quite a bit about rule of law throughout your career. What is the geopolitical importance of rule of law around the world, and how, when enacted in the right ways, can the rule of law lift up and empower women?
I mean, it's an interesting question, and thank you, because I always say, when I'm spending time with young lawyers, or if I'm teaching young lawyers, I always talk about context being so important. And when you're doing that in the international field, then of course the way in which these things operate across the world often are, there's the intersectional aspects of all of this. There are multiple layers in the ways in which people experience oppression and discrimination, and the things that undermine their fulfillment in their lives. And so you have to reckon with all of that when you're doing work in different places. But I'm very strong on not accepting this business about that this is somehow cultural relativism, the idea that you make special concessions for other cultures when it comes to grievous harms that women experience. The whole business of female genital mutilation, or the ways in which women are denied access to the courts for domestic violence, that their men folk are entitled to if you like, restrain them or chastise them, and to do so physically. And those things are built into the social constructs of our societies. And it's only by really challenging those. And of course, it's been best done in liberal democracies. And the rule of law, let's remember, it came out of that notion that nobody should be above the law, and no arm of state. I mean, it starts off with the king, and it starts off with, you know, the emperor or whoever, nobody to be above the law. But it moves into all those interstices: the immigration officer, the prison officer, the police officer, the people in positions of authority where they can exercise power and do it in a discriminatory way. And so across the whole piece, there are ways in which women have to actually somehow use the levers that are within the rule of law, and we have to actually also change and add some new levers to the rule of law. But for me, the rule of law is fundamental. You cannot have a civilized society that isn't respectful of the rule of law. And of course, if you go to China, they would say, we have the rule of law, we make the rules, and we expect people to obey them. That's not what the rule of law, of course, as we know, in liberal democracies, that's not what it's about. It involves independent judiciary, and that is vital to it, that you have people who will adjudicate without fear or favour and not at the behest of government, whether even just mentally knowing what the government are going to prefer, that they have to really interpret law in the way that is to the benefit of citizens, and to value the whole democratic structures. And so independent judges are vital, but so are independent lawyers. The independence of the legal profession and lawyers be prepared to take any kind of case and to make sure that people do not go unrepresented because they're politically unpopular. And authoritarians always go after journalists, because media freedom is also vital in a mature and in a democracy that is really wanting to actually function well and to have checks and balances. And one of the checks on power is to shine the light of public notice on it. And for that we need a media that is free and that is not going to be harassed for doing its job. And of course, when journalists are thrown in jail or assassinated, as Khashoggi was, you have to, there is a responsibility for us in the international community to do something. Societies also need to have a vital civil society. So you need independent lawyers, independent judges, you need an independent media, you need a vibrant civil society where people can organize and can protest and can take to the streets when things are not right without having their heads split. So those things are so important. And for women in amongst all of that, there has to be recognition about the ways in which women are disempowered within this, that women's voices have been silenced, and that when women make the complaints, they were not believed. And across all of the piece, that has been the experience of women, the silencing of women. And in recent years, as women have had access to education, have become more empowered, are moving into the sort of the structures of society at higher levels, then voices are being heard. And for a long time, in the first stages, invariably, women will conform to what, they play the male game, the way the guys expected things to be done, and became lawyers or became judges, and to do it in exactly the same old way. But increasingly, as we have more and different experiences coming into the legal world and the profession and into the academy and into the politics, then it brings the experience. And there's nothing better than the diversity of that to actually improve on law, reflect in law the experiences of women's lives, and to actually make sure that women are at the tables of judgment, of decision making about how society should develop. And you only have to look at authoritarian men It's so interesting. We're living through sort of a number of pandemics at the moment, not just COVID-19, but we're also living through the contagion of populist authoritarian government, and often, narcissistic men who do not value women, and you know that from their public expressions in relation to women, and who don't surround themselves with many women, because unless they're women who will uh, be yes women, conforming to a rather stereotyped notion of how women should behave. And so I really do think that, as we move forward, law has to become a space in which women can seek recourse for the wrongs that they experience in their lives. And it is one of the important ways of addressing the continued subordination of women in so many parts of the world. Now, I've been working on, I went to the refugee camps where the Yazidi women are living. Women who were enslaved by ISIL, who have suffered hugely by being raped and raped over again and passed from hand to hand and resold as wives, as second wives and so on. Really the most shocking experiences, and then to be torn away from children whom they gave birth to and who became their comfort and progeny, and then that their own communities won't accept those children into the communities. And so seeing the suffering of those women, they deserve justice, just as the women in the Congo who were mass raped, just as the women in Darfur. We need to actually find mechanisms, and justice sometimes can be done through courtrooms, and we have to have the international legal system deal with that, but we also have to find other ways in which we can archive the experience of women, so that history doesn't forget what women have gone through in recent times. So the work that I'm doing just now is vitally important. We're just seeing just now, in Tigray, 10,000 women have just been raped in this business in Ethiopia. We're also seeing that the Uyghur women, the sexual abuse there too. I've heard the testimonies of some of the women who've experienced that, and having your children taken away from you and sent to special schools to sort of deracinate them, to forget their culture and religion. And of course, an interference with reproductive rights. So there's a lot of work for us to do, but the gendered nature of law has to be recognized, and we have to every term be saying, how does this play for women? Does it deliver justice for women? And if not, what do we do to correct that?
I think those were a lot of important points that you just went over. And I know that this is going to take us even more over time, but I have so many questions for you. So I just, one last question, and then we can wrap it up. But I want to quickly lay out some statistics from the UK, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that 1 in 4 women in the UK will experience domestic violence in her lifetime. Every year, 400,000 women are sexually assaulted and 80,000 women are raped. And 2 women are murdered by their partners or ex-partners every week. And so domestic violence alone costs approximately 32.9 billion US dollars just in England and Wales. And then there's the direct cost to the healthcare system, so the justice systems, to child and welfare support, as well as the indirect cost of lost wages, productivity, and potential. And this information is all there if you're willing to look for it. And so it's difficult and hard to imagine why more effort isn't being put into stopping gender-based violence in the UK, when the UK, like so many other countries, are literally paying for violence against women. So what ways can the law be used within the UK to prevent and to punish GBV?
Well, we're just putting through Parliament a domestic abuse bill. It's just been passed, and I'm in the House of Lords. Which is, I suppose, the equivalent of the American Senate. Although we're not elected, we're appointed. But we in the House of Lords put a huge amount of effort into improving that bill, and I was very active on it. And and we now have to see, so the law has been improved. We've made non-fatal strangulation, which all the research and many of the cases that I had done for women who were violently abused was that strangulation was part and parcel of the daily round when somebody got angry of catching you there, and the fear that women have that they're actually one of these days it's going to be final, to live with that fear, and yet, of course, barely ever taken seriously by the police and not prosecuted. And we've created a standalone offence on that. We've done a lot about making special demands on reporting in relation to this and medical reporting. But one of the problems is that we still have, within we have a high bar to reach in the criminal justice system. It's beyond reasonable doubt. Unlike the United States, we can have a jury of 10 of a jury of 12, but if 10 agree on a verdict, then there can be a conviction. But even getting 10 sometimes, because so many people don't want to believe that this is part and parcel of a society. Rape has been we've seen actually a reduction in the convictions in rape cases, and I know it's just as problematic. It's almost as in the United States. It's almost as though it's being decriminalized. That it's very hard to get convictions, and so women don't come forward. Women don't want to press ahead with it, because to go through the court system and to again be disempowered because of not succeeding in having your complaint lead to a conviction is a very hard thing for a woman to deal with. So many women don't want to go ahead. But even when they do, the system itself will often be dismissive of the case. And we're not helped, of course, by technology, because social media means that they trawl through all of your social media. They make it, put it before a jury so that people see ways in which you've your photographs on Instagram and things that show you perhaps being how people might see you behaving in a sexual way or speaking in a sexual way, which is deemed inappropriate for women, but which is perfectly acceptable for men. And women pay the cost of that. That somehow certain kinds of women don't get the protection of our systems of law, and we really have to be challenging that. The idea of the desirable and perfect victim, and every woman deserves the protection of law, and we really have to be continuously challenging this. But we've got real problems about getting convictions in rape cases, and I know that your system suffers from the same problems.
Well, thank you so much, Helena. I wish that we could keep talking for much longer.
Well, sometime I'll come and do it with you again.
Yes.
I mean, what we know that this is about is that there is a level of misogyny, and misogyny isn't. We're not talking about men hating women, but we are talking about still in our societies a sense of entitlement amongst men about sexual expectations of women, that women are to deliver. That somehow that women are supposed to be caring for them and loving them and so on. And then if women don't want to do that, then they have to be punished. And so there's a lot of misogyny alive in our society at every level, and women who are in politics or in the public space get punished if they are deemed inappropriate in any way. So we live with misogyny and patriarchy, and the law embodies that stuff. And so it takes a lot of hard work to be challenging it and to bring people to a realization of the damage it does to our societies. And we just have to get men to step up and say, this is not just a problem for women, it's a problem for us. We want a better society for our daughters, for our sons, for everybody. Let's work at this together.
Exactly. Patriarchy harms everyone, not just, the women in the system.
Yeah, and men who don't conform to what is considered, a proper masculinity, they suffer hugely too. And trans men and women. I mean, it's about the whole ways of people suffering. These are issues of human rights, and we should use the language of human rights to talk about it.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on Gendering Geopolitics today. It is incredibly powerful to hear a lawyer of your stature speaking about misogyny and about patriarchy, about women's rights. So thank you so much for joining me.
It's very good. Thank you. Bye.